lose this.
I don't trust him. And I don't want to be here.
Don't Worry Darling is probably the most disappointed I've been in a cinema all year, next to Thor Love and Thunder.
You are not like the other gods of kill. Because I have something worth fighting for.
I've previously liked the directing sensibilities of both Taika Waititi and Olivia Wilde, and I was really shocked to see that movies based off of good trailers ended up being as bad as they were.
This place is dangerous. What is
No. Jack, it's okay.
But I think in the case of Don't Worry Darling, it is a movie that is almost designed to be a trailer movie. All of the visuals and the imagery and the questions that are raised in the trailers were cool and were interesting, but when you get to the actual movie, you discover that they don't go any further beyond what was in the trailer. There's no more added context or an added reason to care, and what you end up with in the finished film is just 2 hours of weird visual imagery, no character work, and a wholly unsatisfying twist reveal, which culminates in an ending that is actually laughable. And that's before we get to some of the woeful performances in this movie. Don't Worry Darling, directed by Olivia Wilde and written by Booksmart's Kate Silverman, based off a Blacklist script written by Shane and Carrie Van Dyke, the grandsons of Dick Van Dyke. A lovely bit of Hollywood nepotism was used to create this baby. The film stars Florence Pugh as Alice, who is married to Harry Styles' Jack, and they have recently moved out west to the Victory Project, which is a idyllic 50s set town where all of their neighbours are living their best lives, and they have parties, and their men go off to work, and they spend their days cooking and cleaning and keeping a happy household and spending time with their kids. But all is not as it seems, which is apparent from like the first minute of the movie. And so you spend your time following Alice as she slowly gets like these meagre breadcrumbs pointing towards the fact that all is not as it seems, whilst we wait to see what the twist reveal is going to be. This is some of the laziest world building I've seen in quite some time. Again, plenty of cool visuals. You've got kind of a Bioshock vibe going on, what with the 50s set town and even a plane crash, which incites further questions which are never resolved. And you've got like men in orange jumpsuits taking people away in the night, and all these kind of weird allusions to secret weapons that the guys are working on, or even kind of UFO bait. But all of that comes to a head with the twist reveal that isn't anything particularly interesting or original, it's just a simulation.
Bullshit.
Olivia Wilde said in the lead up to this film that her influences were things like The Truman Show and Inception and The Matrix, and I just have to think like, wow, talk about giving away your twist so wholeheartedly before the movies even come out, because it is not only based on those kinds of movies, it is derivative of those kinds of movies. I can't believe the big twist was a simulation at a time in cinema where we've had all those previously established simulation films.
Whoa.
And it doesn't do anything different or fresh with the idea. When it happened in the movie, I was like, really? A simulation? That's what we're going with? And it doesn't set up any kind of rules for any of this stuff in the movie in like a natural way. There's no setup for things that happen later on. Florence Pugh's Alice will just be sitting at a dinner table and she'll point out that all the couples there have all come from the same 3 towns, or they've all had the same kind of holidays, and you're sat there like, we haven't gone over this, or if we have, it's been very lightly touched upon. There's a moment later on where it's revealed that the kids in the Victory Project are not real, but we're never given any hints towards that. And on top of that, you just got a buttload of weird imagery for the sake of weird. Like, at one point, Florence Pugh's Alice is squished against glass, and I guess it's supposed to represent how trapped she is. That never comes to a head. There's never any explanation for why this weird shit's happening. There's no explanation for why the plane crashes. And I've seen some answers online bandied about which range from the more which range from the more sensical, like Chris Pine's Frank did it to test her, to the absolute nonsense, like perhaps it was a fly buzzing around in the real world that she mistook for a plane in the simulated world. Because there is no rich themes or character work to dive into with this movie, all of the ambiguous questions can only lead to silly answers. I was thinking, whilst I was watching this, to the ambiguity in Jordan Peele's Nope and why that works where this doesn't, and I think it's because the ambiguity in Nope invites questions about the theme and the meaning of the movie, like for example the Gordy's home incident, the shoe that is levitating. Those sort of questions and the why behind those scenes in the movie lead you to think about the overarching point behind it, whereas all the questions you're left with in this movie are because things were poorly explained or completely left absent in their explanations entirely.
Go, boy! Yeah!
Florence Pugh gives a good performance with what little she has to work with, and it's kind of a shame because I feel like there is a good movie in there somewhere with her as the lead, had she had a better script. Because I actually think the idea of a simulation which is created and run by single lonely men who want to gain some semblance of control back in their lives, kidnapping women to create this idyllic nuclear family unbeknownst to them, is a great idea for a thriller, and it's just not executed well in the least, and it doesn't really dig into the questions within our own society about why men might be led to do this, or what would happen if that did occur. The central relationship between Florence Pugh and Harry Styles' Jack is devoid of chemistry, and I think that's the biggest problem with the character work in the film, is that later on everything kind of hinges on their love and their relationship, but there's no time given to it in the first half for you to buy it sufficiently. And of course what doesn't help is that Florence Pugh can act and Harry Styles very much can't. I think we all need to tip our hats to Christopher Nolan, because he obviously got a great performance out of him in Dunkirk with very little, and I think now we're starting to really see why, because as soon as he opens his mouth or punches for any kind of emotion, it ends up borderline Tommy Wiseau.
What I like about acting is I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing.
There's a scene in the movie early on where Harry Styles is making dinner for Florence Pugh, and I just feel like the way the scene is edited, it feels like it's trying to cut around Harry Styles' terrible performance. He said in interviews leading up to this that he feels like he doesn't know what he's doing with acting, and it really shows here. It's a shame because I feel like, he's got the movie star looks, he's got the presence, and there's no reason why musicians can't be good actors. We've seen that previously. But just with this, he just is way out of his depth and doesn't know what he's doing, and it shows. The reveal at the end as well that Harry Styles is in fact an incel doesn't make any sense. For one thing, he's an incel that has a super beautiful wife. So that's completely contradictory to the whole mindset of an incel and the kind of people that fall down these kind of rabbit holes on the internet. He sat there listening to some podcasts, thinking about what a real man should be. Meanwhile, Florence Pugh, of all people, walks into his apartment. His wife, he's married to Florence Pugh, and he's worried about what's going on the internet. Doesn't make any sense. And I feel like it doesn't feel true to life with that actual incel culture that we see online, and it doesn't make it feel authentic, the idea that he would plug her into a computer. The whole reasoning behind it seems to be that he thinks she works too much and that she hates it, and her response is just like, oh, but I love working, and that's really as far as that goes. There's so many opportunities in the script for nuance, and it just falls flat at every turn. I think what would have been potentially interesting with this whole setup is for Harry Styles' Jack to be as unhappy as Florence Pugh in this simulation. Like, what if he went through all the motions, got them inside the simulation because he thought it would be a simpler time, they'd go back to when men were men and women were women, and he'd feel happy and content, and he discovers that it's actually a living hell and that he's just as unhappy as he was in the real world. But instead, all the men in the movie are like super happy that they're there, and they're just kind of mustache twirling and one-dimensional. All of the principal cast, from Gemma Chan to Nick Kroll, outside of Chris Pine, Pugh and Styles, have absolutely nothing to do and have no character. We don't know anything about them really, and that's what leads to such laughable moments as in the third act, Olivia Wilde reveals that she knows it's a simulation, and the reason why she's in the simulation is because she wants to hang out with her children who are dead in the real world. No setup for that whatsoever. There's also no setup for the idea that if you die in the simulation, you die in the real world. Florence Pugh just bashes Harry Styles' head in, and then we're told that, he must be dead in the real world. It's like, okay, well, potentially that would have been a problem for her to deal with when she gets through to the other side, but obviously we want to wrap things up very quickly and in the neatest way possible. Speaking of that, there is a car chase towards the end of the movie when Florence Pugh is trying to escape the Victory Project that ends so laughably, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe what happens. She's essentially driving towards the Doctor's car, and she's got 2 more cars on her tail, and the way she gets the better of all 3 of these cars is she brakes, and for some reason the Doctor's car, which was speeding towards her, doesn't brake, and the 2 cars behind her all converge and crash and blow up, and that sorts that problem out. Just what is going on? Meanwhile, Chris Pine's Frank, who is the leader of the Victory Project, who's had this kind of back and forth antagonist relationship with Florence Pugh, his ending just culminates in Gemma Chan's character realising where she is and then stabbing Chris Pine, unbeknownst to him. Such a weak ending for a villain that, well, wasn't really given much to do in the first place, but at least it was well realised by Chris Pine. You can tell he's an actor that is way above the calibre of this script, but he does his best, as does Pugh. I've seen lots of talk about the craft behind this movie being really good, and the production design is really stellar, some great cinematography. I really liked the score, but I think it just exemplifies why story comes first, because the script is so bad and so unsatisfying, and the characters are people we know nothing about, so that when we see all of these cool visuals, it just means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. I came away from the film feeling very cold. I was frustrated by the fact that it didn't dig deeper into the questions that it was raising about our own world and about what it means to be a man in this current time, and what might lead men to doing some of these terrible things shown in the movie. It's all so surface level, and then on top of that, you don't even get much bang for your buck in terms of the weirdness or the thriller angle. There's no kind of horror to it. I was reading some tidbits on the original. Version of the script, and it seemed like the version we would have gotten from the Van Dyke brothers would have been a lot more gruesome, and there would have been a lot more like bloody action towards the end with Alice trying to escape. And even though I don't think that would have saved this film or made it that much better, I think we would have at least gotten some bang for our buck, and it would have been a bit more of a satisfying ending. As it stands in the movie, you're just waiting, you're wading through terrible character relationships that are devoid of any chemistry. You're sat there wondering what the twist is going to be, because it's so painfully obvious that all is not what it seems in the Victory Project. And then in the last third of the movie, we get a really weak twist where it's revealed that it's the real world. We get incel Harry Styles, which is barely touched upon, and then we get a really, really limp chase to the finish line. And then Florence Pugh's character presumably wakes up. It's not really clear.
For someone like you, someone to challenge me.
I just wonder what happened, because for the script to get on the blacklist, the premise and the execution must have been somewhat competent, and for Olivia Wilde reteaming with Kate Silberman off of Booksmart, you'd think that would be a winning pairing there, because I really enjoyed Booksmart, and I think one of the things that really stands out about that movie is the character work. There's loads of memorable characters in there, loads of great moments where you see humanity, even from the supporting characters outside of the two leads. So I don't know what went wrong here. Like, I think even with the twist as weak as it is, if we liked the characters and cared about them and bought the romance between Styles and Pugh, I think it would have at least been a star higher. As it turns out, all of the behind the scenes drama, all of the rumours of Florence Pugh falling out of Olivia Wilde and Harry Styles spitting or not spitting on Chris Pine, all of that stuff turned out to be far more interesting and far more engaging than the finished product. And it's a shame because out of the two Warner Brothers releases that were left this year, Don't Worry Darling and Black Adam, I was way more excited for this. I thought, again, the trailers looked fantastic, and even when the bad press started coming out and the rumours that it was a bit of a mess, I still was intrigued by it. So this one was, just a crushing disappointment on all levels. I can't quite believe that it ended up being as wafer thin as it was. So if you want a 50s set sci-fi thriller story with a plane crash, go play BioShock and you'll have a much better time, and the story is much better realised. A big thank you to my full fat tier patron, Dr. Chike. If you'd like to donate money to my Patreon, you can find me at patreon.com/fullfatvideos. If you'd like to find me on Instagram, you can find me at full_fat_videos. And if you'd like to find me on Twitter, you can find me at fullfatvideos.